Trader Jerry is back up to his old tricks. The general manager of the Mariners, Jerry Dipoto, once again showed that he is willing to be one of the most active and aggressive general managers in all of the sport as he goes out there at the trade deadline and outbids the Yankees. Yes, I guess that is indeed possible, in order to land probably the best starting pitcher that was available at this trade deadline, a man by the name of Luis Castillo. Of course, we're already aware that the Cincinnati Reds are not making this trade necessarily because Luis is a bad player. They've been in fire sale mode since they offloaded Winker and Eugenio Suarez to us at the start of the season. Dipoto went back to that well. He said, I got you once. Let me get you twice. And I don't think there's going to be as many people around the league throwing as much shade at the general manager of the Reds as they did with that prior trade. This is a fairly win-win kind of deal, but it is indicative of the fact that Dipoto intends to try to win this year. This may not be the only deal they make, but it does show that they're still going to try to go for it this year. They may not be the complete most aggressive team possible in every way, but they're not going to allow a situation like what was going to go on with George Kirby to upend them. And Kirby has been a fantastic young pitcher for this Mariner team. He's fit into that starting slot well, perhaps coming off one of his best, if not best, performances this season in his last outing, but he's also on a pitch count, and the Mariners are being protective of him, as you should be, which means the second he goes out, you're going to take quite a dip in that starting rotation. And with the hitting as it is, right around with some guys struggling to get to that Mendoza line, you need your starting pitching to be dominant, just as you need your defense to be dominant, just as you need your bullpen to be dominant. Those three factors are working fairly well together to keep this team afloat, keep this team better than just afloat as they wait for some of these bats to perhaps warm up and maybe another bat to return here on the horizon. Now, with Diego Castillo, what are you getting? Well, you're getting an awesome starting pitcher with plus stuff. I would say even slightly better stuff than what you get from Robbie Ray. He's got a real nice, easy delivery to him. The leg kick barely comes up, and he really just gets back locked into that arm slot, going back and snaps it forward. It's a little bit almost kind of reminiscent as a delivery of a like Pedro Martinez kind of guy. And he lives with a four-seam fastball, explosive four-seam fastball that can get up as high as 98 on the gun, sits pretty regularly around 97. It's got some nice late action to it, unusual late action to it, where it really has a little bit of a dip. All of his pitches have a little bit of a dip to them, a bit of a sink, but it can have that dip while it also has late action that runs in on the righties. And boy, that can make it really tough on them. That's a hole that you get in the swing of right-handed batters at times. He then offsets this with a change that then will ride away from those right-handed hitters really well. And of course, because of the change, you got him out front, and it's hard to recognize between those two pitches. So he pairs those nicely together. He's also got a sinker to induce some ground balls, and he's got a slider that goes a little bit more kind of 10-6 in its action, which also has a tendency to induce ground balls. But that four-seamer is what jumps out to you when you watch really any kind of tape on him. He can use it on those right-handers to run in. He can also use it on the lefties to get it on their hands, where a lefty will give up on the four-seamer a couple inches off the inside off the plate. It ends up right there on the black on the corner, and they just kind of shrug because there's not a whole hell of a lot that they can do about it. So this is a dominant pitcher here. This is not just an arm you're adding to the pen. And the Mariners do have now 2 years of club control, so it's also not a rental, where sometimes in the past at trade deadlines, far back in the past, the Mariners have gone awry by giving up a lot of assets for players that are minimal impact and then only on a short-term, like I said, rental basis. So you have him a couple years for club control. The interesting part of this is that this now starts to allow not only this year, but the future horizon of this rotation to take form. Logan Gilbert, George Kirby at the top. Then you got Castillo as a number 3, an awesome number 3. Then you got Robbie Ray as an awesome number 4. And then theoretically, you eventually bring up Hancock, your number 6 overall pick from just, a couple years ago, to then be the 5th man in your rotation even going into next year. That's a rotation that could easily bloom, if it can stay healthy, to being one of the most dominant rotations in all of baseball. And as I talked about at the top, looking forward, we do need to fix the lineup, but keeping the starting pitching, defense, and bullpen in this sort of state they've been in, all working together well, can help this team win a lot of games, especially in the type of stadium they play in that really has shown in the past that teams that play like that and that can put those three things together almost alone can kind of carry the hitters a little bit. But I'm very excited for this upcoming rotation and what he's going to provide, not just now and into the future. Also wouldn't be surprised to see Dipoto make another trade here, as we still have a couple more days before the deadline is going to come. Now, the cost is definitely a little bit tougher here, much tougher than the Winker Eugenio situation. The Mariners are giving up on Noelvi Marte, their former first-round pick from very recent, who has been tearing the cover off the ball in Everett, looking like the type of shortstop that gives you that rare ability of speed and power, and he can play the position truly. Of course, this does make a lot of sense why the Mariners have him in this deal, though, in the respective they just gave Crawford a 5-year extension. Crawford's become kind of a leader in that clubhouse. Doesn't look like he's going anywhere anytime soon, so that opens up more of the door for Marte to be a centerpiece on this type of deal to upgrade another position of need on this team, which is a reason that I can applaud this. You were eventually probably going to be crossing the bridge of having to move Marte out of position to third base or try to get him to the outfield. And now where does that place his value in the long term? I'd also apply the same thing to Edwin Arroyo. I can't see his name, but that would apply the same thing. This guy is not rated quite as highly as Marte. Marte would be your number one prospect after Julio's now been called up. But you'd probably put Edwin somewhere 7, 8-ish in the Mariner prospect system. Much like Marte, he's a shortstop that can hit with power, and he can run, and he's been tearing the cover off the ball from single A. But similar of age, similar in being maybe just a couple years out, and similarly, you're feeling pretty good about the prospect situation as it sits right now in the respect of Crawford's not a tremendously old player, and I think the contract you gave him is not exorbitant to where you're going to feel hindered by it, and they like what they're getting out of him, I think, both from on the field and within the clubhouse, which are both important factors here on a young, up-and-coming team. So while those two centerpieces of this deal certainly hurt, it's when you look at what you're dealing from a position of power here on this team and how you're looking, it's okay on that aspect of things. And to me, you preserved really the most important part of this from my standpoint, which is I want to keep my top two starters in this rotation, being Gilbert and Kirby, and I want to preserve Hancock in the long term. I think having a great starting staff could be just awesome for this team going forward, again, to pair with the defense and a dominant bullpen. The Mariners also threw in a AA pitcher by the name of Stoudt, who could be something. He's sitting in kind of a middling state this year for the team, 24 years old. I think that there's not a really big asset to push out in this deal, so that's not a big loss. And Andrew Moore, a former second-round pick, I think, from many years back, who had a little bit of a cup of coffee up here a couple of different times, a few different chances, didn't do much with either of them. And so that, again, not a big loss from the Mariners' standpoint at that with the back end, too, that are added in this deal. This is about Marte and Arroyo. You lose a little bit more potential assets there than to go get another bat here if they wanted to go make another move. But again, this doesn't decimate the farm system. You're still well stocked into the future. And boy, when you look at this starting rotation as it goes forward, you have to get excited by what they offer. You got some power arms, you got overpowering arms, and you got no real guys on super bad contracts either. Even the Robbie Ray, who I know struggled today a little bit with the Astros, as many starting pitchers are going to struggle against that Astro lineup. I still think he bounces back to being a fairly solid pitcher for us long term, and that we look back on the starting rotation with the addition of Castillo as that final addition to round out with the young guys you got coming forward to really make this a dominant aspect of this team, again, not just moving through the rest of this year, but on into the future. So go Mariners, get excited. And Jerry, you never know, might not quite be done yet. So let's go. You know where I'll be, guys, live streaming these games. Hop on in and do get hyped. My name is Brandon. Thank you for watching. Hit the like button. Please subscribe. But please, beyond all that, don't you ever forget, go M's.